So we're back once again with the illustrious Mr. Scott Meyers. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Roel. How about yourself?
Good, good. Whereas we're recording this, it's mid to late January and things are already picking up steam. So
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of continue where we were left off last time, but a bit of more of I guess a deeper dive, but more of almost a philosophical thing. This whole thing about how do you generate passive income in self storage? That's a
Hmm.
question that I've seen around the internet, not just in our forums and other
Hmm.
places. So I want to touch upon that,
Hmm.
but I also wanted to kind of ask you and put you on the spot a little bit. This
Hmm.
whole issue of passive income in general.
Hmm.
What's your take on it? Is it a real thing? Like you
Hmm.
do the work once and then you sit back and just let the
Hmm.
checks come in, or what? What's your take on it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's make sure that we're on the same page with everybody's the questions that everyone is asking. And so, when people are looking at passive income, many times they may be thinking about an investment that, like real estate, that is more passive than active. And so, even though they're actively investing, they may be buying a house and rehabbing it and renting it out. They view that as a passive investment. But the way we define it, a passive investor is somebody who is not signing on the loan, that is not putting up all the money, that is not doing the heavy lifting and the remodeling and overseeing all of that, or general contractors. They literally are investing passively, whether they're wiring the money in and then they're sitting back and waiting for the returns. So there's a distinction there. I think many folks over the years, educators and information folks in real estate, have said, "Well, this is a passive. It's a mailbox passive investment." You get a loan, you buy it, you fix it up, and you put a renter in it, and then it's mailbox money. It's passive. Well, that's not the way it's typically defined, and in traditional investment circles, that is absolutely not the way it is viewed. So I just want to make sure that we make that distinction.
Hmm.
So if we're talking true now, apples to apples, you have an active investor and you have a passive investor. In terms of passive investors, those that do write the check, they're part of a syndication, or maybe they're even a hard money lender, or they're in a partnership and they're just the money partner in a project. In most cases, we're talking about a syndication, which is a lot of what we do. We work a lot with a lot of our equity partners, our investors who invest passively. They're not signing on the loan. They're wiring a check in. There's multiple investors that are engaging with as little as $50,000 on up to 100,000 or more. But then after that, we're the ones who are driving the performance of the project and making everything happen. And then they see the reports afterwards. And then once we get to the place where we're cash flowing, they get their distributions, and then their K1s at the end of the year. The good part about being passive is that they're equity owners, at least on our side. There's a number of ways of investing passively where you may not have equity. You may be part of a debt fund in real estate, or part of a REIT where you just invest and then take the dividends and returns, kind of like a real estate mutual fund. But in our project, speaking specifically towards ours, our folks are equity partners. So they have a piece of ownership. They have shares of the LLC. And with ownership comes benefits. They get the depreciation that comes along with that investment, as well as a share in the upside. So they get cash flow along the way, depreciation annually until we either sell or refinance the project and they move on. And then they get a share of the profits on the back end. So they are passive investors. And from that standpoint, they don't do the heavy lifting. They don't take on the risk. They don't have to oversee. So from that standpoint, they're passive. Now, perhaps some of those questions that have come about, or maybe the misrepresentation that you're driving towards and drilling down towards, is listen, any investment you make, even on the passive end, you need to keep your eyes on the syndicator, the promoter, the manager of that entity. Are they doing the right things? Are they driving the performance? When you get the monthly report or the quarterly report, does the performance that is shown on that report match what was in the original documentation when you signed on for the investment, or the private placement, or the PPM, the private placement memorandum, and the projections they had? So a passive investor, a good passive investor, is going to look at that and become just a little bit active if they're off the mark, and contact their partner, the promoter, the syndicator, and just say, "Hey, I see we fell a little bit short, or the cash flow is a little bit short, or we're behind in our occupancy. Here's our projections that we set forth a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And there seems to be a shortfall here. What is it that you're doing to make sure that you're bridging that gap and that shortfall?" And or if you have experience, there's many folks that partner with us that have experience in self storage. that they have a lot of money. They have money sitting around idle, and 50,000 to put into a project to put to work is perfect for them, because they would need $250,000 or more to invest actively in something else. And so if they've got money sitting aside, they're going to invest passively with us, but they have experience, and they can lend help and open up their Rolodex if we need assistance, and they can provide guidance and help us get over the hump if needed, or at the very least, just maybe take a look at the investment a little bit differently if necessary as well. So those are the type of passive investors that we like, that on the front end they do their due diligence, and that's probably a bigger piece that we should focus on. Is if you're a passive investor, you need to still go through the process of looking at the numbers, and looking at the underwriting, and then the due diligence on the project. You're not going to do the due diligence, but you're going to get the due diligence that the owner, the syndicator, the promoter has done, and then you're going to go through it and look at it to flesh out if there's anything that stands out, any red flags, or anything that just doesn't look right, or any potential gotchas before you invest your own money. And then again, looking at the underwriting just as if you were going to buy it on your own, because you're investing a smaller amount of money, but you're still looking for those the returns that are projected, and making sure that that all happens, and that starts on the front end. Like any investment, Roel, we know the money's made on the front end versus on the back. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer to that question, but I think we touched on some of the key points.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay objective, because some of these
Mm-hmm,
things I kind of know. Well, I have my own opinions, and I've heard you speak as well, but I'm trying
mm-hmm,
to approach this innocently from the perspective of somebody who's coming to this, who's fairly new to
mm-hmm,
self-storage and or real estate investing.
mm-hmm.
So from what you were saying, it sounds like passive does not necessarily mean effortless. Like
Correct.
there's still a
Mm-hmm,
lot of effort
mm-hmm,
behind being a passive investor. It
mm-hmm,
might sound like an oxymoron, but how does one, and I know we talked about this a little bit in the previous one that we recorded, where we talked about some of the
mm-hmm,
actual ratios, IRR, et cetera.
mm-hmm,
So for that, make sure to find the other video that we were
mm-hmm,
talking about with those numbers. But from another angle, I guess, how does someone prepare to be a passive investor?
mm-hmm,
Like, how would they know? Because when I was sold into real estate education many years ago to take these
mm-hmm,
advanced classes and stuff,
mm-hmm.
it was positioned as learn how to make passive income,
Yeah.
but it's
Mm-hmm.
really learn how to become an active real estate investor is
Right.
what I was taught and what I in turn teach.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
how would you recommend or suggest to somebody whether or not they know if they should enter the self-storage industry as a passive investor or as
mm-hmm,
an active investor?
mm-hmm. So let me answer that a couple of ways. One, we did touch on that in the previous video, and where some folks that come to us, they want to learn about the business, or they've been out there, and they've been beating around, beating the bushes, trying to find deals, trying to find the right opportunity, and they just didn't have time to really put forth the effort and the time that it takes to get in actively. And so they decided that, well, if I want to get in, another year goes by or several months goes by, and I haven't gotten into my first or next self storage facility. I've got some money put to work. I'm going to go put it to work with this company over here, this person over here, and let them do the heavy lifting. And even though I may not get as high a returns as I would get if I own the whole thing, I don't also have to sign on the loan. I don't have to do all the heavy lifting that goes along with it and putting in all that effort and waiting for those returns, when I can just piggyback on somebody who's already doing it, and hook onto the locomotive, and just let them take me along for the ride. And as we also touched on, in many cases, the returns that some the good projects, and some of our projects are producing are higher than what somebody would be able to get and achieve on their own, just because they don't have a team, and they can't find the really good, or know how to create the really good deals with the higher margins. So we find the high profit margin projects, and we bring along our passive investors, and they enjoy in a piece of that. And again, in many cases, that is equal to or higher than they would have received in returns than if they would have done it on their own. So that's I think that's one way of looking at it. But Roel, the other exercise, the other piece of this, or the other approach perhaps to take is, some people are looking to do this passively when they're just learning about self storage, or they're just ready to be a passive investor. They say it's the professional that has a lot of money. They've been successful. They've done well in their practice. For those who are in a professional field or in their business, or they've got money in another retirement vehicle that are now moving it over, and they're going to have control over that, like through a self-directed IRA or a real estate 401k, and they're going to begin putting their money to work for them in a vehicle that produces dividends and then and profits. And so they'll map it out and look at the various investments out there throughout the country and across the investment landscape, and say, if I begin to put 50,000 here and 100,000 there and 500,000 there, based upon the projections, this is how much cash flow I should have back, receive within X amount of years. And, by this certain date, I should have accumulated this monthly cash flow. And that's enough for me to quit my job, or to bring my spouse home, or to build up my retirement again. And so, taking a more methodical approach, and, kind of reverse engineering back to say, here's how much capital I have. If I deployed in these investments based upon their projections, here's where I should be in terms of cash flow. And then in years 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, when we cash out based upon those projections, I should receive this much back. And that's enough for me to retire on. So taking that approach, kind of that surgical approach to your own balance sheet and your own capital, to see how you can get it working for you, is probably the first approach to deciding to become a full-time passive investor, or at least making those steps. And again, we see this, probably the best example is medical professionals. We have an awful lot of medical professionals that are part of not part of our organization, but that are partners with us, and that we put these projects in front of, that then partner with us. And that's exactly what they're looking to do. Is they're earning active income right now with their hands, usually, and their minds. But at some point, they realize that they can't, won't, or don't want to work anymore, or have their paycheck be reliant upon the amount of output that they put on an hourly basis. And so they want to begin to sock money away, invest passively, to build up that monthly income and or the big war chest, so that they can walk away from the practice at some point and sell, and sail on to a better life, and still receive the quality of life and that income level that they had while they were actively producing income.
Hmm. Now, how about somebody, for example, who may not be a medical professional, has some limited funds,
Mm-hmm.
but they still have maybe 10, 15 years plus towards their traditional retirement.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend? Is it still on the passive side, or should they be looking more on the active side?
It could be both. I mean, you can get into projects on the active side with a small amount of money, or partnering, or just structuring something well, and do the heavy lifting if you're not in a hurry to do it on the weekends. Produce something that is either cash flowing, or create value and then sell and get a little bigger pot of money, and then either go and do a bigger project actively, or partner with someone and be more of the money partner, or at that point then go and be the passive investor once you have increased that. So again, uh, of course, I'm guessing the answer is it always depends. The
Mm.
reverse side of that is do it passively, learn the business, take some returns off the table in, say, 3, 4, 5 years on a shorter term project. And then if you have 10, 12 years left, then go out and do it actively. If you have the time to be able to spend and devote to more of it, now that you've learned the business by being a part of one, a partner in one, even though a minority owner, and now you have more cash to be able to go out and do a project on your own or in a partnership. So a couple of ways of skinning that cat. And again, we shy away, Roel, as you know, from producing advice for anyone, but those are
Mm.
a couple of approaches. And, ultimately that's up to everybody's comfort level as to how comfortable they feel going active versus passive, and in which order they do it.
Hmm. So it really seems like really, it depends on the individual's
Mm-hmm.
situation, what their goals are, because I can see ways that they can enter it from a passive side, or
Mm-hmm.
from the active side, or even both at the same time, which is kind of like yours truly doing both at
Mm-hmm.
the same time,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How would someone brand spanking new to this, maybe they're coming
Mm-hmm.
across this video for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
how could they get in touch with somebody in our organization to be able to start to suss out, like, what's right for me? Someone that can, is there a sounding board that they can work off of, or?
Absolutely. So I would head over to selfstorageinvesting.com first of all, and the number on there is to schedule a call to chat with. Most likely, Keith is who you'll be chatting with, and just kind of let him know what you're looking for, and he'll point you in the right direction. We are an organization, as you know real well, that we cover the gamut. We have lots of free videos, resources that you can pull down from the site to give you an idea and a sense, perhaps, of what direction you want to go. If you're looking to go just passive, you could go over to passivestorageinvesting.com. That is our site that has all of our projects that we're currently working on that are available to invest in. But at selfstorageinvesting.com, that is where you have all the tools and the resources for the active investor that is learning the business and wants to get into the business, maybe dip their toe in on the active side. At the very least, I think you need to learn how to be somewhat of an active investor, even to be a passive investor, just so you know how to
Good
underwrite
point.
these projects, what to look for, the due diligence piece of it, anything that goes into it, and then realizing you still should go through those same steps before you invest passively as you would as if you were investing actively.
Good point. We just almost opened that can of worms. I think that's a good place to end it off this time. But we'll try to keep in mind that we should really pick up somewhere around the due diligence topic area, and some of those points you touched upon just a moment ago.
Yep, let's do that, because that certainly is worthy of another conversation, a little lengthier, because there's a lot to it. So be happy to.
All right. Well, as always, Scott, thanks, and you take care of yourself. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, you do the same. Thanks, Roel.
Thanks again for joining us here at Self Storage Investing. We really, really appreciate it. For more great content like this, make sure to click the subscribe button below this video. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Bigger Pockets. You can also visit us at our main website at selfstorageinvesting.com, where you'll find even more free content, our ebook, and registration to our free webinars and education courses, and much, much more. Once again, for more great content like this, please click the subscribe button below. Thank you.